Welcome to Eye on the Illini. This is Mike Cagley. We have a loaded show this evening. First up, we are going to talk with Matt Stevens, Brad Sturdy, Kedric Prince about the Illini in the NFL draft. As a preview, tomorrow morning, we will have Mike Farrell will have an article talking a little bit about the draft effects on Illini recruiting. So that'll be good to look forward to. And we are going to be talking about, of course, the biggest headline probably was the fact that Johnny Newton, who many thought could go as early as the teens, ended up going in the second round. Matt, what happened there? And maybe did you get any reasoning as to why that happened?
What happened there was the first 14 picks of the draft were offensive players, and Johnny Newton, since high school, doesn't play offense. He played running back in high school. He doesn't do that anymore. He plays interior defensive line. So that bumped everybody who plays defense down from where they were projected to go. I saw draft projections that had Cooper DeJean in the top 15. He didn't go in the first round either. Cooper DeJean's comparison to Johnny Newton also is they both had injury issues. Johnny had a broken foot that he was playing with in the last 6 games of the season. Finally got that surgically taken care of, but he did not do anything athletically at the combine and really waited until a week before the draft to do his pro day. That didn't go over well. The problem I saw was that also, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think there was only one interior defensive lineman that went in the first round. So Johnny doesn't play a premier position in the National Football League anymore either. I argue that if you want to play Johnny Newton at a defensive end in a 3-4 scheme, you can do that. If you want to play him in what he's going to do in Washington, which is play defensive tackle in a 4-3 scheme under Dan Quinn, he can do that too. But I just think Johnny got pushed down by the nature of what the draft is, which is sometimes situational. If the first 14 picks of the draft are going to be offense, that left 18 picks for Johnny to get drafted. And some of those after the 14 were also offensive players. I think it was 23 players, offensive players went in the first round. If my math's correct, that means 9 defensive players went in the first round. That Johnny Newton was never going to be one of the 9 defensive players that were going to get drafted. Top 9 players, defensive players that were going to get drafted. So I just think the nature of the draft pushed him down. And then I think you saw a lot of teams unwilling to trade into the first round to take a Johnny Newton and have that 5th-year contract. Johnny Newton was a steal in the second round, and Washington knew it. And I think that they got a top 20 player with where they picked Johnny Newton at in the top of the second round.
Brad, any thoughts on that? Because we were all watching it unfold.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing for me is Johnny Newton didn't have, coming off the injury, I think it did hurt his stock a little bit. Not that you watch him on film, you never know. So they're always going to have that little trepidation. All it takes is one team to pass on you and you start, why'd they pass?
Yeah.
I mean, we've all watched Draft Day, so we know exactly how it happens, right? So, no, I think it's a great fit for him, though, because there are a couple of reasons why. One, I think Dan Quinn's fantastic defensive coach, and he's going to fit in with that system and the way their scheme and the way they run things. The other thing is he's 1 year sooner to get to free agency than the guys who went in the first round. Now, he's making a little bit less money now, but he might have a chance to get that big contract just a year sooner if he performs the way I think all of us expect him to perform in the NFL.
For me, I have to agree with Matt. I think that if this was a traditional NFL draft, I think he probably would have went in the first round. If my memory serves me correctly, they were talking about this was a record of the amount of offensive players that went into the first round. So I don't think it was anything to do with him as a player. I want to touch on what Brad said. The injury thing that's really stupid to me because I know he played hurt, but it wasn't like some major thing where an ACL, which I think is a major surgery. But I guess if you're going to let a guy like that go to the second round because you're afraid of that, Washington got a steal. They really did, not because we cover Illinois. I just think he's an outstanding football player, and it stinks from a financial standpoint from him, but he's going to have a chance to prove himself. And again, we know how good of a player he is and what he'll bring to the table. But I just think the way all these drafts, whether it be basketball or NFL, they're really funny, and they'll find if there's any little reason that they can pass on you, they'll do it.
I was going to say, Mike, as a fan of the Cowboys and the NFC East, you do know that the Washington professional football team, the one thing they do really well is play defensive line. They do a really good job of finding guys near the line of scrimmage on defense. Johnny Newton's entering a system in which there's they're loaded at defensive line. Chico Rivera and didn't make the playoffs with the Washington Commanders or the football club or whatever the hell they call themselves because they were bad at defensive line. They actually traded away Montez Sweat to my Chicago Bears because they were so deep. And they know they can go in the draft and scout and get guys like a Johnny Newton. He runs a whole bunch of different kind of schemes. He'll run a 3-man front. He'll run a 4-man front. He does a whole bunch of wide splits with his guys. Johnny Newton's going to be able to play in the middle. He's going to be able to line outside at defensive end and stop the run in a 4-3 scheme. He's going to do a lot of different things. He can get vertically up the field as a defensive tackle. And there's a lot of different things that they're going to ask him to do at Washington as a younger player. And I think he's going to be able to handle it.
Yeah, as a Cowboy fan, I was not happy to see him go to of all teams, the Redskins. The other thing I thought was most interesting is I actually thought that foot injury might actually build him up because he had a really good back half of the season. The only game that I was a little mystified is at Kansas, where he had a couple of guys in his grasp that had he been able to make the tackle would have changed that game quite a bit. Other than that, I thought he had a spectacular season, but as we know, I know nothing about football. I'm not a coach. But the next thing is I think most people were surprised that Isaiah Adams and Tip Ryman were the next two to go in the third round. Was there anything going on with the Cardinals? Was it Charlie Bullen talking to his old team about how good Illini players were? But anyway, that was unexpected. Matt, any thoughts on that?
You look at the NFL teams that would show up at Memorial Stadium last year, the Cardinals did this in incognito mode because they didn't really show up to scout live in Champaign a lot. They really didn't. So, yeah, I was surprised at the Cardinals thing that they popped up and took 2 Illini in round 3. I will tell you, I think Isaiah Adams is going to start at either left guard or right guard in Arizona on day 1 as a rookie. That's their plan for him. I think that's why he went in the third round. I don't think they thought he was going to be around early on Saturday when the 4th round started up for them. So I think they took Isaiah Adams. The Tip Ryman pick, I love Tip. I think that his story is so awesome. When he declared for the draft, this shows you how bit of a moron I am. When he declared for the draft, I honestly thought, what are you doing? There's no way Tip Ryman's going to get drafted. No chance. And he went from a guy that was completely overlooked by me and by a lot of other people, because I wasn't the only one feeling that way. And I was looking down, getting texts that day going, is he sure he wants to do this? To a guy that was getting drafted on day 2 of the NFL draft. And that's awesome. And the way he did it was he showed during his pro day and during the scouting combine, everything that scouts want to see that he couldn't show on tape at Illinois. That's the fact of the matter, is that athletically, he showed how gifted he was and how raw potential-wise he was. And he better be raw potential-wise, because I think he's going to be behind 2 really good tight ends at Arizona, one of which caught 80-plus balls last year at Arizona. And they don't run a lot of 12 personnel, so they usually only have 1 tight end on the field. So he's going to have to figure out a way to make this roster. But I'm going to stop betting against Tip Ryman, because I've done it before when he was a walk-on and never thought he'd play at Illinois. And I've done it again when he went in the NFL draft, and I thought, man, what are you doing? This kid just proves people wrong, and I think that he's going to make the 53, obviously, as a third-round pick. As I'm talking about this, Tip's probably going to have a productive NFL career because he's just coming under the radar again for guys in the NFL. And I think that's just what his MO is, that he just gets to work. I remember the Brett Bielema quote when he asked Tip Ryman to be a mentor and a guy that would take recruits around the Smith Center and be that person while he was on the roster. And Tip didn't want to do it because he didn't think that he was the right person to show off Illinois and be that raw type of guy, because all he does is go home, eat dinner, and watch Netflix with his wife. That's what I do. And Brett Bielema's response was, God, if all of us could just be like Tip Ryman more often than not. So I don't think the NFL lifestyle is going to affect Tip Ryman. In fact, I know I'd be willing to bet that more than anything. And he'll probably prove a lot of people wrong. But on Isaiah Adams, I think he's going to start day 1 at guard, because that's where he should have been playing all year, his entire career at Illinois. And I think a lot of scouts got a little bit scared about Isaiah Adams when he went out to right tackle because he had to, because they had no other option at right tackle after the Kansas game. And he got really demeritly graded at right tackle, that's never where he's going to play. So I don't understand why that really affected his draft stock as much as it did.
Brad?
Yeah, I think Tip was a prime example of a guy who was a workout warrior. His workout showed he has the athleticism, and they were like, wait, what is that? Wait a second, this guy can actually move and he can run and he's strong, and wow, I like him. I like him. I like him a lot. And so there we are. And then we have Tip Ryman going in the third round. Isaiah Adams, I completely agree with Matt. He's a third round selection because he's a guard. He played right tackle because somebody had to play right tackle. We could have put more guards out there. We could have said, you're the guard, but you're playing tackle. But that would not be effective. He's still a guard, and he just had to play there because they didn't have anybody else who could do it.
It's like a power forward in basketball.
On the Illini roster, it is.
Can't follow that.
Yeah, no kidding. The Isaiah thing, it doesn't surprise me. I just think he's a good athlete. I've always thought that. And I think when you look at the NFL, and I'm going to mention this when I talk about Tip, they see things. Baseball general managers, basketball, they see things that typically we don't see. And then they also see things that fit their schemes. I remember Tip when he went into the draft, they asked if he was sure. He knew how good he was. The thing that was scary that I heard, I don't know if Matt and Brad, you've heard this, but Illinois didn't throw the ball to him very much. And that's why there wasn't a lot of tape. Matt's 100% right. But once you get an opportunity to showcase your skill, because obviously he's fast enough, that was probably the most impressive thing, watching him run. And then what's sad, and this is not a knock on the University of Illinois, was why you didn't throw the ball to him more. Because this kid can run, he can move, and here he is being selected as the 82nd best prospect in the NFL draft. And the word is they throw the ball to him once a game, then he was done. So I think Arizona got a steal, and I think he's going to get a chance to play.
I got to be honest with you. That's the question that comes up. Illinois football under Brett Bielema is unleash the hounds and let the big dogs hunt. And Ryman didn't get many opportunities. And when you look at his measurables and you see some of the big plays he made you at least ask the question, why not more often? I'm not trying to kill the coaching staff, but it is what it is.
Two things quickly. One is that I think it's important to note that Isaiah Adams is the first Brett Bielema era recruit that has now gone in the NFL draft, which is actually early than what you would typically, because he was a junior college kid that left a year early. It's the first Brett Bielema Illini era kid that got drafted. And the second thing that I just want to point out for this podcast purpose and for the Peter Schraegers of the NFL Network of the world, Tip Ryman does believe in birds. I hate the fact that they, on his draft day, said something. Look, I was there at the combine. He tried to make a joke. Tip's not funny. Like, it failed miserably. But Tip Ryman does believe in birds. It would be hard to be drafted by the Cardinals if you don't believe in birds. Like, he made the joke of he's never seen a baby pigeon. Maybe pigeons are robots. It's not a funny joke, and it landed poorly. It made Tip Ryman seem like he was a conspiracy theorist. He's the least possible conspiracy theorist you'll ever meet. He believes in birds. But no, Isaiah Adams being the first Brett Bielema era draft pick, I know that he's harping on the development of the Lovey recruits in where they get drafted in the NFL draft. But Brett Bielema and Bart Miller went and found Isaiah Adams in Garden City Community College in Kansas, who came all the way there from Canada and had two very productive years with the Illini and added to Brett Bielema's lore of being able to produce offensive linemen in the NFL. And he's now starting to do it at Illinois. That is a Brett Bielema one where he can lay his stamp on it and nobody else had anything to do with it.
Yeah, I know, it's good. And we basically, breaking news, Matt breaks it. Tip believes in birds, so we don't have to worry about that. And Tip also proves that you got to leave the jokes to the funny guys. That's why Brad and I are so funny, and we don't expect Matt and Ked to break as many jokes as us because we're just naturally funny. So the next up, and I thought this was really interesting, and I'm going to tell you, Casey Washington, who has a heart the size of a lion and made some incredible plays to turn around potentially seasons, but he had a hard time sometimes getting separation. I was surprised to see him go in the 6th round, but I was really happy to see him go in the 6th round.
So Casey Washington's an interesting case. Again, he was a workout warrior. If you went to his pro day because he didn't get to go to the combine, I would see some of the numbers that he was recording, whether it was the 40, whether it was the broad jump, whether it was the vertical jump, and I would go, and I had the numbers against what guys did in the combine at wide receiver, and I went, oh my God, like he's going to be in the top 10% in every one of these categories, every one of these track and field categories. Then you go back and you look at the tape. And when there was a big moment that needed to be had, Casey Washington usually had the football in his hands, whether it was the catch against Toledo that allowed them to win that game, whether it was the catch at Maryland that allowed them to win that game, whether it was his last game ever at Memorial Stadium where he tried everything he could to save the Illini from a disastrous performance against Northwestern. He was there doing that. So I think Casey Washington put enough on tape in big moments that I think, being in the NFL and making catches in the NFL is not going to scare Casey Washington. The other thing I will say is that Casey Washington is a very good run blocker as a wide receiver. It's what George McDonald loved about him, 100%. So I think that Casey Washington's a really good pick here. The other interesting element is if you look at the Falcons depth chart, they came into the draft with no receivers on their roster over 6 feet tall. So I think that they went into this draft thinking they were going to go get receivers, bigger possession receivers, and Casey Washington fits that bill. He's going to have guys like Rondell Moore on the outside that they picked up in the offseason. All of their receivers, they had 3 offseason pickups at wide receiver. All of them are under 6 feet tall, and all of them basically either play way outside or in the slot. Casey Washington's going to be that big receiver, and they also play a lot of 11 personnel, which is 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 running back. So I think Casey Washington's not only going to have a chance to make this 53-man roster, but have an impact as well.
Yeah, I think Casey Washington is very intriguing because I always thought he was, until his combine, I thought he was just a guy who made tough catches and didn't have, we would question his separation. He can't get separation. He can't get over. But he always made, like you mentioned, he makes those big plays and he made tough catches. He's got good hands, makes contested catches, which I think is important in the NFL as well. But then you see him as pro day and he starts running. You're like, whoa, this guy's athletic too. Wait, why didn't he show that on film? Why didn't he show that on the tape? And maybe it's how he was used. I don't know. I can't say that. But yeah, it really impressed me. And that's why he got drafted. They're like, whoa, I got this tape of him making contested catches. I got him running this. This guy might be okay. So we got a chance here.
This sounds really bad. I think it's how he was used. And here's my understanding. I don't think he's a deep threat guy. I think he's a possession guy. And that's okay for Illinois because they didn't have that splash in the pan guy who could get separation. I think because he was so good at just making the normal catches, basic catches, people thought that that's who he was. He's not Isaiah Williams. He doesn't have that kind of speed. But I liked him because he's physical. He reminds me of a Ron Turner type player, former Illinois coach and Bears coach. If the ball's in the air, Casey's going to go get it. He is physical enough, and you couldn't knock him off the ball. I just really like that. Personally, I'm happy for the kid from all he's gone through. He was in Illinois, he left, came back, and I just think the fans are really going to miss him because if you go back, like Matt just mentioned, this guy made a lot of big plays to not only just win games, but to keep drives alive. Because they knew if you threw the ball to him, you're not just going to knock him over and the ball's going to fly up in the air. I just think this was a steal for Atlanta personally.
Yeah, it was good to see that for him. And now I'm gonna just throw a few things about undrafted free agents. Isaiah Williams he is signed with the Lions. Keith Randolph Jr., the other half of the law firm with the Bears. Denzel Daxon shows incredible acumen and the ability to choose well when he went to the Cowboys. Tariq Barnes is going to go play for the Texans. And John Paddock, which was cool to see this. Apparently Atlanta likes rookie quarterbacks who are older, so that's perfect. He's going to go down there with the Falcons. We've seen some guys get playing around the league or get an opportunity to make teams around the league. Real quick thoughts on that as we wrap up the football segment here tonight.
What happened to Isaiah Williams stinks. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It stinks. He put 2 years of film together that shows him being able to make plays at the wide receiver position. I don't care that he ran a 4.6 40. I don't care. I don't care because when I turn on the film, he was open and he made plays. And he caught 80 balls in 2 years against Big Ten competition. He caught he was the other all Big Ten wide receiver across from Marvin Harrison Jr. Those were the two wide receivers that were all Big Ten first team this year. And he didn't get drafted. And I think Detroit, and I said this on our board at IlliniGuys.com, Detroit didn't take, they only had 2 picks beyond the 4th round. And they took an offensive guard and a defensive tackle, which that shows up with their head coach's mentality that he's just going to take guys close to the line of scrimmage. Great, whatever. I believe that if they'd had a 7th round pick, they'd have taken Isaiah Williams based off of the contract and the guaranteed contract that they gave him as an undrafted free agent. I think it sucks, but I think that he can make the Detroit Lions 53-man roster. I have very little doubt in my mind about that. Quickly, I'll also point out Keith Randolph. I am a Bears fan. I am not thrilled with the depth that they have at defensive tackle in Matt Eberflus's 4-3 scheme. I think Keith Randolph can make this team as a backup defensive tackle in the Bears 4-3 scheme in his home state team and in Chicago. And I also think the John Paddock thing, quickly, I think that Atlanta needs – Michael Penix can't throw every ball in rookie training camp, so they need bodies to throw. I'll leave the Denzel Jackson analysis to Mike Cagley, who watches the Cowboys every Sunday. I'm happy for Tariq Barnes. He had a really disappointing 2023 because he wasn't completely healthy and he wasn't completely in sync with what the new scheme was when Ryan Walters left town. But I think, I said this again on our boards, I think they see a lot of what Jake Hansen brought to town in Houston when he made the team as an undrafted free agent. Tariq Barnes took over for Jake at Illinois at that same middle linebacker spot. D'Amico Ryans is the perfect head coach for him because he likes under-recruited, under-talented, undersized guys. Tariq Barnes may have a chance to make the practice squad at Houston. And if he makes the practice squad at Houston, I think you got a chance to play on Sundays because you never know what's going to happen from an injury standpoint.
Brad, any thoughts on those signings?
I think sometimes you end up in a better spot when you don't get drafted, as it turns out. And I don't think it's necessarily, I agree with Matt, it's not really fair to Isaiah Williams because I think he deserved to be drafted and hear his name called. But at the same time, he's in a good spot. He's got a guarantee, which not many guys who are undrafted get. Good for him. Because I really think the kid can play in the NFL. He can be a slot guy. He can do some things. The other guy, and I agree with everything Matt said. The one guy I thought if you'd have gone back 2 years ago, not last year, not even 3 years ago, I thought Keith Randolph was the guy. I thought he was better than Johnny Newton back in that time period because he was so disruptive, different things. And then he had a good year in 2022. He didn't have a good year in 2023. He wasn't healthy. I really think Keith Randolph could actually play for the Chicago Bears this year. I really do. I think he can play. I think this might be the impetus to push him to maybe make sure he's completely healthy, make sure he's working as hard as he needs to, and has the motor. He's next to the guy with the best motor in college football last year. Now he needs to just match that. And if he does, this guy's got a chance to have a career in the NFL.
I'm not going to go through all of them, but the one guy I really want to touch on, Isaiah Williams. The guy is he's a good locker room guy. You would think that a lot of scouts were like that, and he's talented. I think what hurt him, and I would love to I'll listen to you if I'm wrong. I think there was times where he dropped too many balls. There was times when he was really inconsistent. Matt mentioned the numbers, and he was outstanding, and he was doing it against some of the best defensive players in the country because you knew who was going to get the ball. If it wasn't him, it was Casey Washington. And I don't know if his size hurt him as well. I hope he makes the roster where he can be seen on Sundays, because if you get him out in the open, he's good enough and quick enough to where he can stretch a defense. I do think he'll be utilized in the NFL if he's given a chance. Illinois did showcase him. I can't say that they didn't do that with him because he was given every opportunity. But there were games I remember a couple of years ago when they played Iowa, he had a bad game, and I remember hearing scouts talk about his hands because let's be honest, he was a quarterback in high school, and he transformed into a wide receiver. So I don't know if they had anything to do with it or the size, but talent-wise, it's definitely there. Like I said, he's a good locker room guy. The Paddock situation, I want to touch on him because I think you may get another feel-good story from the University of Illinois if he makes a roster, if he plays, because he was inspiring for Illinois down the stretch, and we know how that all panned out. But overall, I think it was a good draft for the university. I think guys that are marketable. The one guy, I'm happy for all the guys. As a guy who covers all these players, I could tell by Mike's face and Matt's and Brad's we're all Casey Washington fans. That's one guy I think we all really want to see succeed, because I remember watching this kid, and I just thought, and when he was in high school, this was a 3-star kid who just had talent and just had a will to win. So that's my 2 cents on the draft, fellas.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Ked. We've got an opportunity now, more guys in the NFL. It gives Bielema a better opportunity to toot the horn a little bit and see what you can do in terms of maybe flipping a guy or two and maybe influencing somebody in the transfer portal, because contrary to what a lot of fans think, coaching does matter, and getting good coaching and those little things do make a difference when you're trying to put together a total game for the NFL. Now, just so you guys know, you can follow Matt at Matthew C. Stevens on Twitter. And if you enjoy what you hear here on this podcast, you can subscribe to Illini Guys. And not only would you get Ked and Brad, their articles, but Matt's articles are up there as well. And you can go into the message boards and interact with Matt, Ked, Brad, myself, Larry directly. That's one of the neat things about our type of website is that we're actually involved with the subscribers, as opposed to just putting an article out there and then not having much interplay back and forth. Thanks for coming on, Matt.